Chapter 1311, Against Gravity. It didn't take long for him to see the demi-humans' response. They had gathered an entire battalion of their red manky soldiers and had them positioned near their flanks. Their mastery over their kingdom proved truly supreme. If it weren't for Michael's supreme talent sensing the light mana from these demi-humans, then he couldn't have even seen them coming. They hid underground, used secret tunnels in the cliffs and mounds, and even covered themselves in that strange moss that allowed them to camouflage from view. Michael raised his hand, stopping his army. Non-lethal moves only, he reminded them. Although they were being attacked, he didn't want to kill any of these demi-humans. It would sour any potential relationships with their kingdom if so. And besides, these demi-humans could never hold a candle to his army. Rag. Red mankeys surged out of the trees holding human weapons and shields in their hands. It didn't take long for an army containing about 20,000 demi-human soldiers flanked them at all sides, seemingly trapping them in a small circle. Most were hidden while others acted as a decoy. "Surrender now, human," said a red manky wearing a beret on his head. This seemed to be their leader. Michael raised his hand to demonstrate his good intentions. "I'm not here for hostilities, I only want to communicate with your monarch." The red mankeys snarled at his words. They didn't like the fact that he had even addressed their monarch, much more requested an audience with them. He was too young to make such requests. "You court death," they screamed, "then prepare for it." In an instant, Michael felt a change in the air. This wasn't from the magical disturbance in the mana field, nor was it the invisible waves of ability powers. It was something else entirely, which was eerily similar to the power of the knights and swordsmen of the Lionhearts. Violet tendrils appeared out of nowhere, coming from the primitive swords and weapons that these red mankeys used. And in an instant, Michael and the Rebornian army found themselves in a sea of purple haze. The effects soon caused the Rebornian soldiers to feel a tremendous force pulling them down to the ground. Urge. Some of the weaker soldiers found themselves almost crumbling, their legs turning to jelly, as they were subjected to the power of these demi-humans. Gravity. Somehow, these red mankeys could control the gravitational field of the battlefield. And the most surprising part was it wasn't achieved through magic nor ability power. It was something more innate within them, something similar to the eternal flame sword style. It's a manifestation of their sword heart, much like the flames that the Rebornian soldiers were able to manifest. This was a revelation that Michael couldn't help but be excited for. Even though they had basically isolated themselves underground, even though they had no history that allowed them to learn from, these red mankeys were still able to learn their own art styles. He could even tell that their use of the gravitational field was crude. It was simplistic. The only good thing about it was their coordination. They moved in complete unison, allowing the gravitational field to be a lot stronger than it was supposed to be. "Have you seen this before?" he asked Cerberus. "No," the Mystic Master replied, "it certainly isn't taught by the Order." This meant only one thing: this power of theirs was innate. They probably weren't even using this power consciously, it was all purely instinct. Such potential. He was so enamored by this sight that he completely neglected to even think about the fact that they were currently surrounded at all sides. It was at this moment that the red mankeys lunged at his army, attacking their sides, making them turn away from their original formation and create a dissonant sense of cooperation within them. However, the Rebornians held fiercely. They swung their swords, manifesting the fire of the eternal flame. Its heat was able to burn through the purple tendrils brought out by the demi-humans, burning it into ashes. Unfettered by gravity, the soldiers were able to defend against their onslaught with a coordinated attack and defend strategy. One raised shields while the other pierced their swords at the open space between their formation. It was a modified version of the phalanx. "Kurg, these humans," cursed the demi-human captain, "retreat." Seeing their initial attack rebuffed, the red mankeys retreated, using the tendrils of their gravitational field to act as a deterrent against the humans trying to pursue them. And as expected, not even half a minute later, the red mankeys disappeared off into the jungle, not even leaving a single sound for their retreat. The entire demi-human kingdom turned eerily silent. Their entire army had used the complex underground tunnels and vines in their environment to make a quick and easy escape. If it weren't for his mini drones tracking them, he wouldn't be able to see them at all. Thankfully, he did. The entire battlefield was in his hands. He could see them separating off into much smaller groups. Some of them resorted to creating traps within the jungle, while some rounded over to the Rebornian army's backside for a flank. They were resorting to guerrilla tactics, something that had allowed them to keep steady even with the onslaught of humans in the chasm. And it seemed that their tactics only got more intense here, in their main kingdom itself. Onwards, he said to his soldiers. The Rebornian army marched directly into a trap. The entire jungle floor was littered with pitfalls hidden by moss. Once caught, they'd get impaled with sharp sticks laced with some kind of poison that would surely prove fatal within seconds of being administered inside the body. Michael marked these traps in his virtual map and distributed the information to his army. They received it telepathically since they were all connected to Chachk 6. It's why their cooperation was so good. They were basically in their own voice channel that allowed them to speak to each other through only their minds. Chapter 13:12 Ineffective Guerrilla. The Rebornian army skillfully and quickly maneuvered through the forest floor, avoiding each and every trap and pitfall that was set for them. They moved so fast that they had caught the group of demi-humans off guard. Expecting to finish off the Rebornian army, these red mankeys hid atop the crowns of trees with their cudgels and their knives ready in hand. They thought that they'd get to cut down the human army by a few soldiers, one at a time. But how could they have expected that none of them would fall into the trap? And not only that, but the Rebornian army started scaling the trees and apprehending these demi-humans immediately. The caught red mankeys had no choice but to raise their hands in surrender once the Rebornian soldiers got a hold of them. Guerrilla tactics demanded groups to be small, which meant that once caught, they had no chance to fight for their freedom. "Kill us quickly," the red manky platoon leader screamed out. "We will not live without honor." Bound with their hands behind their back, they thought that their lives were done for. The worst they could do here was leak the secrets of their kingdom. However, unexpectedly, they weren't killed, they weren't even hurt. "I'm not here to kill you," Michael said to the red mankeys. "I'm here for peace." And after saying those words, Michael cut their ropes and let them go. They looked at him with perplexed eyes, one filled with apprehension and disbelief. They were wondering if this was a trap or not. However, as the ropes loosened and the red mankeys started backing away, the Rebornian army did nothing to pursue them. The platoon leader looked at Michael with furrowed eyebrows before quickly scurrying off into the jungle and disappearing into the foliage. But because the red manky was so flustered, he absent-mindedly stepped into one of the traps they'd laid out beforehand. He slid down into the hole before he caught himself on the edge of the hole. Unfortunately for him, his feet grazed the tip of the stakes down below, meaning that the poison would now quickly spread to his body and kill him within a few minutes. It was at this moment that Michael caught the red manky and pulled him upwards. Then he raised his hand, conjuring a green magic circle in the air. In an instant, a healing aura emanated off of him and quickly purged the poison out of the red manky's body. "Healed," the platoon leader muttered in disbelief, seeing his foot no longer bleeding. The other red mankeys quickly dragged their leader away, helping him escape. But before that, the platoon leader gave Michael one last look as if memorizing his face. "Tell them what I told you," Michael shouted to them. "Eh? What? How is this possible?" the general of the red mankeys shouted out loud. He'd just been told that multiple of their traps were proven ineffective against the human army. It didn't make sense. Somehow they were able to perfectly avoid any traps, dead ends, and pitfalls that they provided against them. No could get this lucky. And not only that, all of the demi-humans who had been caught were quickly released. This was uncharacteristic of humans. Usually, any captive they caught were quickly killed off right before they were interrogated. Only once the red mankeys proved their loyalty did their use to the humans cease and they were killed. But instead, these humans let them go. Of course, the general's immediate thought was that this was a trap set by the humans. They were letting these demi-humans go so that they could follow behind and find out where they had set up their army. But no such thing happened. The human soldiers kept their pace normally with no sign of pursuing the other red mankeys. "This is bad, by the looks of it they are heading straight for our kingdom," said the general. "We must deter them at any cost." And it was at this point that one of the red manky scouts suddenly spotted something in the distance. Standing atop the sacred tree of the demi-humans, they were able to see a structure in the distance. A structure made out of some strange stone and metal. A human city. The red mankeys could hardly believe what they were seeing. Right in the middle of the jungle, they saw a human civilization set up, complete with houses and establishments of all kinds. "This must be an illusion," said one of the red mankeys. After all, they didn't see the humans building those structures. It simply appeared. One second there was nothing and the other there was suddenly an entire city there. "So this means that this is a trap," said the general. "Using such a grand illusion like this, they probably want us to attack that place and surprise us from behind." The other red mankeys agreed with that theory. "Then, let us see how long they can keep up that illusion. It must take them a lot of energy and resources to keep it afloat. They'll soon get weary and tired." And so, the red mankeys decided to do nothing. The next morning, the red mankeys were astonished to see that the entire structure had completely disappeared once again. Meanwhile, the human army kept on marching forwards, their direction unmistakable, headed towards their sacred tree. HMPH, they must be lacking sleep after that illusion. We'll see if they can last another day. And so, the day passed and the Rebornian army kept marching forwards, getting ever so closely to the demi-human kingdom. Of course, the red mankeys continued their guerrilla attacks to no avail, and as usual all prisoners were quickly released. And by night that structure appeared again. The red mankeys began to doubt their own theories, but still they held strong. They didn't attack the human soldiers. The next morning, the general ordered more traps, more pitfalls, increasing the intensity and number of their guerrilla tactics. This time they must be tired. Unfortunately, the truth was exactly the opposite. The human soldiers looked like they were rejuvenated each day that passed. What's happening? Is that structure truly their own camp? Chapter 1313, Infiltrating the Camp. It was so preposterous that the demi-humans simply didn't want to believe that that humongous structure was truly the humans' camp. Were they being thought of as fools? It seemed that they were. No good general would ever want to build such a gigantic structure in a foreign land. First of all, it was already established that the red mankeys excelled in guerrilla tactics, hiding in the shadows, attacking in a burst, before quickly receding back into the shadows. So, it was only natural that their large, overbearing camp would be subject to that kind of war. They were basically begging to be attacked by creating such an eye-catching structure. The red manky general thought he was outsmarting the humans, but as it turned out, they were a lot dumber than he originally thought. "All right, gather our men. If they dare to build such a structure again, we will attack them at night," he commanded. The entire army of red mankeys rejoiced once they'd heard that. After all, they'd been too anxious this entire time. They wanted to fight these humans, but they were always elusive. Now they attack them while they are asleep. And the best part of it all would be the eventual prize at the end of the war. With such a large structure, such a large army, these humans definitely had a lot of resources hidden inside their spatial rings in order to sustain this kind of mission. They'd never once seen an envoy of humans exit out of the demi-human kingdom and resupply their army. Which meant they brought enough for them to last the entire expedition. And if there was one thing humans were famous for, then it was their opulence, greed, and their obesity. They had lots and lots of treasures and food which would be tremendously useful for their demi-human kingdom. "The monarch will definitely appoint me to a better position after this," the general thought. And so the red mankeys began their preparation. By day, they continued their traps and pitfalls against the humans. They didn't want them to sense that something was amiss. The general even commanded his soldiers to act really frustrated that they couldn't catch the humans off guard. But in truth, they were just preparing for the night. So, once the artificial sun in the skies dimmed, the entire demi-human kingdom transitioned into the evening. The bioluminescent moss from the jungle created the lambent light of a dark sky similar to that of the overworld. Almost 1,000 red mankeys positioned themselves on the crown of their sacred tree, peering down with great care. Their job was simple: watch the humans until the very moment that they created their camp. And finally, the soldiers stopped marching. They found the perfect place atop one of the cliffs, which was devoid of any vegetation or trees. The red mankeys watched as the humans separated into their different divisions. And then poof, the structure appeared. Magic was the only explanation for it. The monarch will be pleased to learn about this. They have an insatiable curiosity for those magic circles that humans use. Maybe once we defeat the humans, I'll give it to them and earn their favor, hehehe. Then the general turned to his army of red mankeys. Go forth, use the jungle to your advantage, the sacred tree will be pleased with your actions. Rah, they all screamed in unison. And within seconds, the demi-humans descended from the tree, using the vines and flimsy branches as a way to safely glide back down to the ground. It took them a few hours to reach the humans' gigantic camp structure. They had arrived just in time. It looked like the festivities and activities inside had just finished. Campfires were being snuffed out, soldiers were preparing to go to bed, and the smell of their delicious food was starting to fade from the air. The humans have been eating those aromatic foods this whole time. I will search their pantries after our assault, they must have more of these foods. And look at those lights, that will be trouble. How are they keeping those bright even though they aren't using magic? The red mankeys moved with the rhythm of the jungle, making use of the rustling of leaves to slowly scale over the walls and enter into their camp. So far, so good, they could hear the humans snoring from here. These species were truly the clueless sort. Follow the general's order, said one of the battalion leaders. Division 1 will be scrounging their resources, Division 2 will sabotage their weaponries, take whatever you can, the division tree will keep watch. We will all move at the same time and complete our missions at the same time. Once we are found out, we shall all quickly kill as many humans as we can and get out. Copy. The red mankeys with mud and moss splotched all over their bodies and faces nodded wordlessly to their battalion leader. And after counting down with his hands, their mission started. Their entire army separated off into much smaller groups, surging forth towards the Rebornian camp like they were a tsunami breaching a city. The first division found the building that smelled like spices the most. That's where the human food was stored. The red mankeys then fitted themselves into the windows and infiltrated inside. Their eyes widened as they saw an entire world of cuisine. Plates and plates of different foods were lined up above the tables, ready for anyone to consume. There were meats, vegetables, desserts, cakes, everything. The red mankeys didn't hesitate to start eating everything in sight. And unbeknownst to them, the windows where they came from had suddenly locked by itself. Throughout the entire camp, shadows darker than black itself flitted through each and every red mankey, following them from behind. And in the demi-human army's eyes, it looked like they had succeeded in their infiltration. However, they were too high on their own success to realize that a strange beat had been ringing in their ears this whole time. Bootatu. Ratata. Chapter 13:14, Camp Infiltrating the Mankeys. The night continued to pass, and the red mankey general waited in the sacred tree for the news of his soldiers' success. Even from up above, he hadn't seen any signs of the human camp moving about. This was good. This meant that the red mankeys hadn't been found yet and that they were continuing their pillaging. However, as the evening continued to pass, nothing was still happening. Red Mankey Scout report. A red mankey with makeshift goggles on top of his head appeared upside down next to the general. We haven't been able to make contact with the inner group, General. The general tapped his foot anxiously on the ground. Then go inside and see what's happening, something is unnerving me. The red manky scout scratched his head. That's the thing, General, we've already sent 2 scouts and they also haven't returned. Once he heard that, the red manky general turned to his scout. What? Why haven't you told this to me sooner? The scout cowered. Well, we thought they were just busy. Useless. We will send more scouts and soldiers, General. No, you bipedal hominid, clearly something is going on inside that camp. Don't send any more of our scouts, just make sure to be ready for anything that comes outside. The general peered down from atop the tree, his eyes trying to see the minuscule details of the camp far below. If anything had gone wrong with our red mankeys, they'd have made a fuss by now. They know to smear bioluminescent moss in the air to signal an emergency. Yet there was nothing, not even a smidge of moss. Everything was eerily quiet, both from the human and red manky side. It was possible that their entire army was captured by the humans. However, it was impossible for all of them to get caught. That's why there was an entire division dedicated to overseeing the entire battlefield. If even a bird flapped their wings at the wrong time, these red manky soldiers were trained to immediately signal their outside forces that something had happened. They made lots of redundancies in case, too. Amongst 1,000 red mankeys, it would only take a single one of them for them to retreat and report to the rest of them that something wrong had happened. But still there was nothing. And as the moss lost its bioluminescence and the artificial sun in the skis started to regain its brightness, the general was 100% sure that something wrong had happened. Hominid, 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 the general cursed. He paced back and forth, wondering if he should report back to the monarch about what happened. However, the fear of reporting such a colossal failure had stopped him in his tracks. How could he explain losing tens of thousands of red mankeys in a single mission? And what's worse, they hadn't even caught a single one amongst them. There was no casualty on the human side. Damn it, the others will use this as a way to bring me down. The general was the second strongest commandant of the demi-human kingdom out of the three of them. If he reported what happened, he'd surely drop from contention. He wouldn't even be a general anymore. A fall from grace such as this was unacceptable. He was so close to getting that promotion and finally being the first strongest general in their army. But just as he despaired, he suddenly saw movement. "Scout," he shouted. The goggled red manky looked down from the sacred tree. "It's our soldiers." Immediate relief lightened the general's shoulders. "How are they? How many are injured?" It was at this point that the scout frowned and began counting in his mind. 1, 2, 3, sir, everyone is accounted for, no casualties and no injuries. They are now on their way to exiting the human camp. Great, I never doubted them in the first place. They must have annihilated the humans then. The scout pursed his lips, hesitant to say what he saw. Sir, there's no casualties on the human side as well." "What? How is that even possible? How were our soldiers able to get out unscathed?" Gulping, the scout said, "They were being escorted by the humans, sir." The general leaned on the branch to the point where he was just a few inches away from plummeting hundreds of meters down to his death. But he didn't care. He wanted to see the truth for himself. And just as the scout had said, a sea of red mankeys began walking out of the human settlement with hesitant steps in their pace. Behind them, the humans simply just looked at them and waved. And what's more, some of the red mankeys waved back, preposterous. The general quickly descended the sacred tree and traveled for hours and hours to welcome his soldiers. And then finally, he was able to meet his army. "What happened? Tell me everything." Each of the red mankeys looked at each other, not knowing what to say. It wasn't until one of the battalion leaders stepped forward did they finally reveal what had happened. "It was a trap," he said. "They were fully prepared for our infiltration. They confined us in their own buildings." "And did they torture you for information?" the general seethed. "No, sir, they fed us, bathed us, and accommodated our every need." Hearing this, the general's jaw just dropped to the floor, unable to say anything. "They showed us how they lived, sir. Did you know each of them gets to eat fish anytime they want? They also have infinite water. They have so much that they even use hot water to bathe themselves in these giant tubs. Burp, and their alcohol was pretty good too. They even gave me a few kegs of their beer as a gift," a soldier said, hauling a wooden barrel behind him. Then the general heard something that truly appalled him. "Sir, these humans aren't that bad. Maybe we can be friends with them." Chapter 13:15, Bargain. The red manky general couldn't believe what he was hearing. Did these demi-humans get changed into different people? Did they get brainwashed there? How could they say that these humans weren't bad when they were the ones that were sieging their kingdom? They were living happily underground, minding their own business when they were suddenly forced to see the light of day. They did ask to be part of this charade that the humans were playing. They just wanted their peace, and yet they were being hunted down by human adventurers and companies alike. How could they not have a seething anger for these people? You have all been altered beyond a shadow of a doubt. Never speak of this again. It was at this point that the other red mankeys started pursing their lips, indignantly standing their ground. When they were first captured by the Rebornian soldiers, they thought that as well. They hated humans to their very core. They would rather die than have any sort of connection with them, much more an alliance. However, they saw a completely whole other world in the Rebornian camp, one that wasn't in trouble with their food, didn't have to think about drinking their water if it had poison in it or not, and one that didn't discriminate against other species. They saw many demi-humans among them, even mankeys. Those yellow mankeys were their genetic cousins, and yet they were a lot more advanced than even them. This was what surprised them the most. From what they knew, the yellow and the blue mankeys were the weakest ones out of their entire species. They had no talent in fighting and were only good with building structures and other such things. Last they heard, the yellow mankeys had perished in the parched lands. So, imagine their surprise when they saw those same yellow mankeys living like humans, wearing their clothes and wielding the power of those demigod humans. And what truly allowed them to change their mind was the fact that the Rebornians didn't even try to persuade them. No, they simply gave them the food and the resources that they were supposed to steal as a gift. "You'll need this more than us," their leader said. And they believed him. After all, if these humans were planning on killing them, that would have been the best time to do so. They had an entire army there. They could have crippled the entire demi-human kingdom by annihilating a third of their forces. But they didn't. They let them go and simply gave them food, drinks, and comfort. Perhaps what they'd been saying was true. Perhaps they did have good intentions. "I'll see for myself." The red manky general decided. "Get me my armor, I'll storm their gates and see how they respond." They. Michael truly felt sorry for the red mankeys in the demi-human kingdom. From what he saw from the state of their soldiers, it seemed that they weren't in such good shape. They were a little bit gaunt, with their ribs showing in their bodies from the lack of sustenance that they were eating. This underground world doesn't have that much food. The chasm had some parts of it that grew vegetation. However, most of them were being used up by the conglomerates and the other human companies trying to conquer this demi-human kingdom. No wonder they hated humans. Not only were they trespassing on their own property, but they were stealing their food too, making the demi-humans not even have enough food for the winter. And so, he gave them food. Not only that, but he also healed any injuries or afflictions that had made them ill. Most of them had ticks and matted fur, which had been leeching their power even more. And in truth, this made Michael a little bit surprised. Their overall power must have been reduced by over 40% because of insufficient food and diseases, and yet they are still able to put up a fight against the conglomerates. This was very impressive. It almost made Michael want to recruit them immediately. After all, he knew that they were extremely talented. He knew it when his golden nose alerted him of multiple people within the red manky soldiers who had tremendously good talent, ranging from B to S class. However, he knew that they still didn't trust humans for him to suddenly start to awaken their talents. He had to simply keep on earning their trust. This was how they were going to make an alliance with the demi-humans. And about a day later, their general finally appeared. Wearing that beret hat skewed on his head, the red manky general looked like he was ready to fight against an entire army by himself. He had his chest puffed up and his axe ready in his hands. "Who is the leader of this human settlement?" Michael walked forwards, meeting with the general by himself. "You," the general said, "you are the general." There was a lot of doubt in the red manky's voice. Michael was way too young to be leading an entire human army like this, in his opinion. I am, and you are the general of the Red Mankeys. I would like to propose an alliance between us. The demi-human general frowned. I make no friends with the humans. I know trust is hard to earn, so let me make the first step. Why not have a simple bartering system? This seemed to interest the Red Mankey general. He'd seen the bread and the food his soldiers brought back from the human camp, and they looked delicious. I'm listening. You need food, water, and resources. I can provide you with everything you need. Such a tempting offer for the Red Mankeys, the general couldn't immediately say no. And what do you want in return? Michael smiled. Whatever you can offer, that is the point of a barter, is it not? The Red Mankey general bit his lips as he began to think deeply about Michael's offer. Chapter 13:16, Humans Entering Kingdom. We want 100 sacks of wheat and rice, the Red Mankey general eventually said, and in return we'll give you 10 stacks of bioluminescent moss and mushrooms. Of course, the general knew that the human leader wouldn't accept such an unfair deal so easily. This was just a negotiation tactic. He would want to leverage it to at least 10 stacks of wheat at least. Okay, Michael said. The Red Mankey general's words were caught in his mouth. He was so ready to do a whole scene about unfairness if Michael was going to refuse. However, he didn't even try to negotiate. The human boy simply agreed as if it was a very simple matter. And we want 500 barrels of clean, drinking water, the general said, gaining a bit more confidence. Sure, Michael replied again without hesitation. Hearing this, the general and the other Red Mankeys watching from afar couldn't believe their ears. Were the humans really going to give them those resources basically for free? Bioluminescent moss could be found everywhere in the chasm. It was basically useless, and yet the humans were willing to accept it in exchange for so much food and water. This would be enough for their entire army to last until the winter. It was at this point that the general started to get excited. Perhaps there was merit to being in some kind of bargaining system with the humans. If they were going to be so careless with their resources, then the general was certainly happy to take them off their hands. Red Mankeys, the general shouted back, and about a few minutes later a group of them walked forward lugging around a few sacks of bioluminescent moss in front of the human camp's entrance. This is the moss. Michael inspected the goods before nodding his head. He snapped his finger and suddenly a huge shadow appeared on the ground. Then, sacks upon sacks of wheat and rice began to shoot out from the hole and land in front of the Red Mankeys in a neat stack. Soon after that, barrels of water rolled forwards, completing the transaction. Bite, the Red Mankey general took a single bite out of the wheat grain and was able to indeed verify that it was edible. Even the barrels of water were ice cold. They all thought that maybe the humans were simply lying, but this was definitive proof that they were a man of their words. The general quickly had his soldiers take their resources back, afraid that the humans would quickly realize their mistake. Didn't they know that food and water was so important in this chasm, and they were willing to give it away for free? Nice doing business with you, said Michael. Yes, you too, said the Red Mankey. Michael offered his hand, and the general reluctantly shook it. I hope that this will be the start of a good alliance, Michael said. In response, the Red Mankey general simply nodded his head and showed a wide grin towards Michael, showing his teeth. This was not an alliance, no. This would just be the Red Mankeys taking advantage of the human stupidity. Ambition burned brightly in the general's mind. With these resources from the humans, they could actually fight against the other Red Mankey armies in their kingdom, thereby making themselves the superior group. Perhaps he would be able to finally take over the first commandant of the monarch. He thought that his opportunity would be dead in the water since the first commandant of their army was able to bring the monarch great success with the tamed magical monsters. But with these resources, he could go from the second commandant to the top. Just you wait. Meanwhile, back in the entrance of the demi-human kingdom, the illusory wall had finally begun to crack. After days and days of trying, the Vanderbilt Army and the Goldstone Coalition was finally able to breach the other side and enter into the demi-human kingdom. They even had to work together and pool their resources together to do so. But once they were on the other side, that temporary alliance was quickly broken. "We'll head this way," said Levi Vanderbilt. "We must make sure that we get ahead of Teresa and find the kingdom immediately." And on the other side, Teresa had her own ideas as well. "Our coalition needs to figure out how these demi-humans are able to tame the magical monsters." So they immediately began to march forwards, treading through the overgrown jungle with their thousands upon thousands of soldiers. Because of that, they were very easy to spot form the top of the sacred tree. The third commandant of the demi-human kingdom, another general, saw these new humans enter and immediately wanted to destroy them. "Ha ha ha ha, this is going to be my chance. Once we defeat these humans, maybe the monarch will be pleased with my results and give me the second rank." Motivated by a promotion, the third-ranked general immediately dispatched his red Mankeys soldiers. And of course, the method of fighting they used were guerrilla tactics. They began to set up pitfalls, traps, and other kinds of deterrent in order to whittle down the numbers of the humans. And they worked. Within a single day, the Vanderbilt army was forced to camp a little earlier than expected due to the injuries that his soldiers got from the pitfalls. "Damn it, these demi-humans and their annoying traps," Levi cursed, "but thankfully it looks like Teresa's having the same problem as me." On the other side of the demi-human kingdom, the Goldstone Coalition made their way into the jungle searching for the magical monsters that the demi-humans had tamed. With Caliburn leading the way, he was able to spot the dangers of the guerrilla tactics and suggested Teresa make a slight detour. Both armies moved at a snail's pace because of this. They had no way to deal with the annoying tactics of hit and run that the red Mankeys employed. This made the two conglomerate leaders wonder, how did Reborn get so far? Chapter 13:17, Competition with the Mankeys. The days passed and the entire second army of the red Mankeys found themselves in a comfortable position. They had food, they had water, they had everything they needed in order to survive. Somehow, they had found themselves with the humans more and more. It started with the simple bargaining system, some food in exchange for the bioluminescent algae. Then, the red Mankeys discovered beer. They wanted to trade for that too. "General, we beg of you, please, we must have this beer," said the platoon leader to their leader. The beret-wearing general pursed his lips. "I don't know what you all are raving about, it's just alcohol, we can brew that ourselves." "But not this one, sir." The red Mankey gave frothing, cold beer to their general. "Have a taste." Curious, the general eventually took a single sip, and as soon as he did, his eyes widened with great surprise, and unbeknownst to him, he wanted to keep drinking more and more of it. However, he had to keep up his appearances with his red Mankeys. "Fine, trade for this beer, but that's it, no more, we can't interact with humans much more than this," said the general. And so beer was added to their little agreement. That should have been the end of it, however, who would want to enjoy beer alone? During nights, the red Mankeys heard the humans cheering and laughing and making merry as they drank their beers in their tables. And the red Mankeys did their best to stay away from them. They did, however, some of the human soldiers called out to them and challenged them to a simple game. "I bet I could drink more than you," said the soldier. "Come, sit with us." And eventually they complied. "What, you drank with the humans?" the general seethed. "How could you break bread with them?" And in response, the red Mankeys defended themselves, and they said, "The pride of the red Mankeys couldn't be tarnished like that so easily. We had no choice but to enter the human camp and teach them who was the more superior race." Hearing this, the general pursed his lips. That was true, they had to prove that they were superior. "Okay, but just that one time," said the general. And that was supposed to be it. Unfortunately for the red Mankeys, they hadn't been spending their nights drinking beer like the humans had. They were blackout drunk while the humans were still ready to drink some more. "You lost, what about the pride of our race?" the general complained. "Come back tomorrow and prove them wrong." And so, it then became that the red Mankeys and the Rebornian soldiers drank with each other every single night. They simply couldn't beat the humans, they were too good at drinking, and the red Mankeys were way too prideful to back down. Eventually, the general himself had to step in. You useless hominids, I'll do it myself. General and Soldier Red Monkey became embroiled in their mission to prove their race superior. They drank and drank and drank to the point where they even forgot what they were drinking for in the first place. Eventually, they were just having fun with the humans. There was still competition, but it was more lively now. Both Red Monkey and Human cheered and laughed as any one of them vomited beer from drinking too much. "It's unfair," said the general. "You humans must have some kind of antidote to keep yourselves sober." The Rebornian soldiers shook their heads in response. No such thing. However, the Red Monkey general was doubtful of their words, so he investigated them, and he soon found out the truth. "Aha, you guys are using that hot spring thing to rejuvenate yourselves. It must be some kind of special, magical place." The Rebornian soldiers shrugged. "Well, if you want, you can also bathe in our hot springs." "We definitely shall," replied the General Monkey. And so, the Red Monkeys didn't just visit the Rebornian camp during the nights. They also did so during the days. They would spend their nights drinking, and after that they would bathe in the hot springs to rejuvenate themselves. "Yes, yes," said the general. "This was your secret to being sober, Monkeys. We shall be spending the majority of our time here in order to acclimate with the hot water. Then we will finally win against the humans." "Hear, hear," shouted his soldiers. With a simple payment of a few precious herbs from the chasm, they were able to spend the entire day bathing themselves in hot, hot water. But of course, they couldn't just end their day there. One didn't end it there. Everyone knew that you had to drink cold milk after the hot spring. And so they did. They put their hands on their hips, chugged an entire bottle of milk, and let out a relieved breath at the very end of it. Feeling as if they had properly prepared themselves, the Red Monkey soldiers challenged the humans in a drinking game once again. They came at night bringing their own kegs of beer. But to their surprise, the humans were not there. "What the?" The Red Monkey general furrowed his brow until he heard some muffled screaming from one of the building structures in the camp. Apprehensive, the general commanded his men to slowly stalk the building forwards. They kept their noise to a minimum, allowing themselves to gossip and eavesdrop on the humans. Once they put their ears on the walls, they began to hear what they were saying. "I knew they would make a comeback. The orator angels always need a lot of time to warm up in the series. I really think they could go all the way this season." The Red Monkey general frowned. These were probably code words. These humans were planning something. "Aha!" the general shouted as he burst through the door. And there, inside, he saw the human soldiers all looking towards one gigantic screen on the wall. Chapter 13:18, Personal Allies. "I've caught you now." The general's words were suddenly drowned out by the raucous shouting and cheering from the human soldiers. He immediately went into a defensive pose, thinking that they were going to attack him. But they didn't. They just kept cheering and shouting. It didn't even look like they noticed that he and the other Red Monkeys were there in the first place. "What are they all looking at?" the Red Monkey general wondered. He tapped on a soldier's shoulder and presented himself. "What is happening here?" "We're watching the Game 7 finals of the Rebornian Baseball Cup. We just scored a home run that allowed us to tie against our opponents in the bottom of the ninth. We have a real chance of winning this cup," said the soldier. And of course, his words were pure gibberish to the Red Monkey general. What were they even saying? It looked like they were peering through a portal that led somewhere in the overworld or something. "Our rivals, the Angora Shooters, are really good this season. They've stepped up their game." The general frowned. They were making all of this noise for a game. He couldn't understand it. Neither did his soldiers. What could be so exciting about a game that didn't even feature any fighting? It looked like they were just hitting some kind of ball toy. "All of you humans, it is time that you return to our scheduled drinking," said the general. "This time we will beat you and you will black out." However, his words were just drowned out by the words coming from the television screen. No one was even listening to him. They were all just intently focused on the game as if their lives depended on it. They weren't even this serious when they were fighting just a few days ago. Angry, the Red Monkey general blurted out, "What is even with this game? It's childish and simple, meant only for boys. Now why don't we go out there and drink like men?" Immediately, the whole room turned ice cold. They could cut the tension with the knife. And immediately, the red manky general noticed his mistake. He had plucked a sensitive nerve.
Simple. Childish. Easy.
The human soldiers couldn't believe what they'd heard. Baseball was the national sport of their nation. They lived and breathed the bat. They couldn't let the demi-humans disrespect that. And the fact that they'd been away from home for months at a time meant that they were even more passionate about baseball. All right, why don't we play and see if it's really all that simple? The red manky general eventually nodded his head. Sure, we'll defeat you and we can finally go back to drinking.
Eh, eh, eh.
It didn't take long for the red mankeys to stumble onto the ground, gasping for breath, as they were defeated in baseball 100-0. They knew the rules, they saw how it was meant to be played, however. They just can't seem to hit any of the balls that the pitcher threw at them. That's cheating, that ball is definitely filled with magic, the general cried out. Oh, you haven't even seen a ball thrown with magic, said the human soldier. That's just a good, old-fashioned change-up. Baseball isn't just about strength, it's about spirit, said the human soldiers. It was at this point that the red mankeys were absolutely ashamed of their humiliation. Every competition and game they played against the humans were completely one-sided, and red mankeys were supposed to be the superior race. Sir, said one of the red manky general's scouts, you have an urgent message from the kingdom. The Council of Mankeys are requesting your presence. Damn those old fools, the general shouted. Do you want to go listen to another lecture from those boneheads, or do you want to go and practice baseball? The red mankeys immediately answered, baseball. Good, said the general. We aren't leaving here until we at least score a run against them. One of his soldiers came up to him. But sir, they have an extreme advantage against us. They know how experts play it, while we don't even know how to use the proper tactics. This made the general ponder and ruminate. You're right, that is unfair. So he walked up to one of the soldiers and said, how can we get to see one of those baseball games in the television? Television? The soldier corrected. Well, we play regular season baseball on the TV every night, but if you want to watch other baseball games, perhaps some from previous competitions, then you'll need your own phone. Phones, the general muttered.
Eh.
Michael was truly surprised to see that the red manky general came to see him so soon. I need one of those phones, said the general. You know about it, Michael asked. I have heard of this term before, said the general. Our monarch was able to get their hands on it, but I always thought that they were just useless pieces of junk. I didn't know that you can watch baseball games with it, and that it can be used to buy beer or food. Smiling, Michael nodded. That's right, but it can do so much more than that. You'll definitely want to purchase one for yourself. How can I acquire this phone? Such a fortunate turn of events for Michael, he immediately took advantage of the situation. Well, phones are quite important for our nation, limited quantity, you see. That's why we are only allowing our allies to purchase them from us. The red manky general pursed his lips. I see. You can form an alliance with us. You've seen our soldiers, our men. We're not as bad as you think we are. I hope you see that we're different. I do, the red manky replied. I have come to appreciate your company in this jungle. I cannot speak for the entirety of the demi-human kingdom, but me, personally, I want to become allies with you humans. Chapter 1319, Gradual Trade. Michael was more than overjoyed to finally see that the fruits of his labor were starting to get to the demi-humans. As expected, it didn't take them long to finally find the truth behind the rebornian spirit. It was none other than comfort. Now he was sure that they were going to be his allies one way or another. I agree with that, he said to the general. As long as you'll help me convince your monarch that allying with me will be the best option they choose. The red manky general nodded. Yes, but we cannot do it so easily. Our method must be slow and steady. You cannot do what you have done before. If you come to them asking for an alliance, they will attack you. We are overprotective of our monarch, you see. They are the most important demi-human within our midst. They keep our sun shining, they keep us protected. They are the reason why we are able to live here in the darkness of the chasm. So the other two generals will immediately come to you and wage war. Michael nodded, agreeing with the second-rank general. This was what he needed this whole time, a new perspective. Can't we also be allies with them? He asked the general. Hearing this, the red monkey shook his head. The third-ranked general does not like me. Oh, is it because you prevented his promotion? I stole his wife from him, said the general. But that too, he's been trying to usurp my rank this whole time. Anything that I try to do, he will be on the opposite side. And what about the first-ranked general? The red monkey once again shook his head. Not possible, the first-ranked general already has someone that he is in an alliance with.
Who?
We do not know, the general answered, but we do know that thanks to this ally he is able to conquer the magical monsters that prowl through the chasm. Hearing this, Michael's eyes widened with surprise. Ersatz. Tell me more about this first-ranked general and his ally. I cannot tell you more because I do not know more. Previously we were not able to conquer those beasts. They were our predators, but he found a way to tame them. I do not know how, but he did. And this allowed him favor with the monarch, allowing him to become first-rank general ahead of me. Michael furrowed his brows. If this was true, then the most obvious answer was that this first-rank general was working with the ersatz behind the demi-humans' backs. I think what's happening here is that. Once he explained the situation to the second-rank general, he began to seethe with anger. Unacceptable, he said. He is the most adamant in refusing help from humans, yet he broke it first, and he is working with the very same humans who had caused the chasm in the first place, that traitorous snake. Suffice it to say, both of them were angry, which meant that working with the first-rank general was a no-go. What do you propose we should do? He asked the general. We do what you are doing right now, said the general. We trade.
They.
The second army of the demi-human kingdom had now become more powerful, more well-equipped, and a lot happier than ever before. Even more when their general had been given their title by the monarch. Now that they were fully allies with the reborn company, they didn't have to tell lies to themselves if they wanted to visit their human friends. Drinking between men and red monkeys became common. Even bathing in the saunas were a daily thing. And of course, they bonded over their love of baseball. Michael was able to build a simple baseball field in the demi-human kingdom, and both sides played against each other almost every day. In fact, it became their daily training session. And slowly, the red monkeys were integrating into the rebornian life. They were starting to live like them, breathe like them, think like them. Their clothes, which used to be made of primitive styles, were now a lot more modernized. They were getting influenced by the things they saw in social media. Yes, the red monkeys also began to frequent the social media apps of the phone. Once they'd become allies, Michael gave every single red monkey their own phone. Of course, they first used it as a way to stream baseball games from the nation of Reborn. But then, as they got more familiar with the tech, they began to explore more. Texting, photo sharing, and even food delivery, they tried everything. In fact, most of the red monkey soldiers and Rebornian soldiers were in their own group chats. They were discussing their favorite baseball players as well as some tips and tricks about how to get better. And they would have continued to bond, if not for the fact that the second army of the demi-humans were forced to go back to their kingdom and report to their superiors. They'd been gone too long. We will not be long gone, said the general to Michael. I will do as we have planned. Michael nodded and gave him a good luck salute. Just like they discussed, they were going to conquer the demi-human kingdom through slow but steady trade. They were going to make them depend on the Rebornian resources without them even knowing about it.
They.
The second-rank general and the rest of his red monkey climbed up the sacred tree of their kingdom. Unfortunately, they had to hide their phones back in the Rebornian camp. Both Michael and the general agreed that it would be too suspicious if everyone had them in the kingdom. However, they did bring something else. The red monkeys marched through the town square of the sacred tree, carrying sacks and sacks of food and barrels of beverages. Chapter 1320, Haul Back at the Sacred Tree. The citizens and demi-humans of the kingdom all peeked out of their houses perched upon the large branches and vines of their sacred tree. Kids and adults alike were staring wide-eyed at the amount of wheat and rice and vegetables peeking out of those sacks that the red mankeys carried on their backs. They'd never seen such a haul. Amazing, our soldiers are really good at their jobs. That's the second-rank army with their general, wow. Where did they get that from? Of course it must be from one of their successful raids against the humans. Hooray, we'll get to eat good tonight. The kingdom of the demi-humans shared their food with each other. It was the only way they were going to survive, so the hall of the second-rank army was the hall of the entire demi-human kingdom. And tonight, it looked like they were going to have a feast. The second-rank general marched on top of the tallest branch in the sacred tree. Above it, the palace of their monarch was located. It was truly a wonderful sight seeing such an estate. However, his mood was quickly soured when he saw a satyr approaching them from the palace. Advisor. Second-rank general. The two were on such bad terms that they didn't even greet each other with their names, only their titles. You are late, the advisor said. We have summoned you and your army several days ago. Where have you been? The general fixed his beret atop his head. I am doing busy, important work, unlike others. His challenging words had angered the advisor. Unacceptable, wait till our monarch hears about this. Looks like we'll have a new second-rank general crowned tonight. Of course, tell them that we have also brought enough food and water for the entire kingdom for a feast. Hearing this, the advisor's eyes widened, and finally it was at this point that he noticed the red manky soldiers behind the general. They had just finished stacking the crates and sacks they had carried from afar. And seeing such a tremendous amount of resources, even the advisor couldn't help but gulp in hunger. How did you obtain these? All of the red manky armies in the kingdom were required to bring food and resources back to the sacred tree, but never this much. Even the first-rank general was only able to give about a third of this. I obtained it from the humans, he said. Of course, he didn't mention that it was through trade, not plundering. So, could you please tell our monarch the good news? The advisor clicked his tongue. Very well, but they are busy at this moment. They are currently convening with the first-rank general about some matters. Hearing this, the second-rank general frowned. Now that he knew about their betrayal, he couldn't help but think that their monarch was now in trouble. Tell them that I would like to speak to them soon, he said. The advisor frowned before bowing towards the general with the most insincere movement. Second-rank general, someone called out. The beret-wearing red manky didn't get a chance to breathe with relief as he was once again approached by one of his enemies. Third-rank general, he greeted back. I have heard the great news. You were able to gather enough food for a feast. You even broke the first-rank general's record. Congratulations. One couldn't even hear the sincerity in the red manky's voice. The second-rank general knew that it was simply a fake gesture. Thank you, he replied. My men have worked very hard. Very hard indeed, the third-rank general said. How are you able to do it? The red manky fixed his beret. Wouldn't you like to know? Haha, but unfortunately for you, we all know that each of our armies are entitled to our own secrets. I don't want you to take over my spot. Hearing this, his direct superior frowned. This is impossible. I have already begun my attacks on the other humans that have breached our kingdom. And we haven't been able to plunder even a quarter of that in that entire time. The second-rank general simply shrugged his shoulders. I guess you weren't working hard enough. Curse you, men! The third-rank general immediately shouted at his soldiers. We will depart immediately. Attack those humans at once. I heard that one of them is a conglomerate called the Vanderbilts. They must be rich. We can't let these other red mankeys best our soldiers. Then they began to depart. Smiling, the second-rank general was starting to be in a happy mood. But just then, he saw someone approach him from the estate of their monarch. It was none other than the first-rank general. Ah, good to see you, the lanky red manky general greeted. It is, replied the beret-wearing general. Then, silence. They would have wanted to get into a screaming match with each other, however, they were in the presence of the sacred tree and their monarch. It wasn't appropriate. "The monarch requests your presence," the lanky general said you had a gift for her. "I do, see for yourself," said the second-ranked general. And finally, the first-rank general saw the sacks upon sacks of resources in their tree. It garnered a horrified and visceral reaction from the general. But how? But that didn't last long. Eventually, the lanky general regained his composure. "It doesn't matter, you think that this will get you the first-rank spot, it will not. No matter how much food you give to the monarch, it will not matter. The only thing important here is power. True power. Those magical monsters will help us fight against the humans and prevent their greedy conquest against us." Hearing this hypocritical voice, the second-rank general simply stayed silent and didn't even dignify him with a response. "We will see," he said, before turning and heading into the monarch's estate. And that brings us to the end of this chapter. This is a Jason audiobook, and I just want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you for staying all the way through. Whether you're listening to relax, to escape, or to dive deeper into these incredible worlds, your time and support truly mean everything. Every like, every comment, and every share helps this channel grow and allows more stories to come to life in audiobook form. You're not just listeners, you're part of this journey. If you have a web novel you'd love to hear turned into an audiobook, don't hesitate to send me a DM. I'm always looking for new adventures to bring to the channel, and your suggestions could be the next big story we dive into. And if you're enjoying the content and want to support even more, consider checking out the Patreon for exclusive early releases, bonus chapters, and behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you for being here. Until the next chapter, stay immersed, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next story.